The winter of 2023 brought the most savage blizzard the Montana wilderness had ever witnessed. Temperatures plunged to 30 below as hurricane-force winds whipped snow into blinding walls of white. It was in these merciless conditions that Rebecca Chen found herself stranded in a remote mountain cabin 8 months pregnant as her husband James sped away in their only vehicle, abandoning her with nothing but a hastily scrawled note. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." With limited food, dwindling firewood and no cell service, Rebecca faced a brutal reality. Neither she nor her unborn child would likely survive the night. What she couldn't possibly know was that less than a mile away, tech billionaire Alexander Blackwood sat in his state-of-the-art surveillance room, watching her desperate situation unfold on high-definition monitors. The reclusive founder of Blackwood Enterprises had retreated to his secluded mountain compound to escape public scrutiny, only to witness a life-or-death drama playing out on his property's edge. Nobody just abandons their pregnant wife in a killer storm unless they're running from something far worse than nature, Blackwood murmured to himself, eyes narrowing as he studied the husband's hasty departure. The decision Blackwood would make in the next few minutes would forever alter the course of 3 lives caught in fate's crosshairs. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something truly extraordinary for you. Rebecca Chen stared blankly at the note clutched in her trembling hands, her breath forming small clouds in the rapidly cooling air of the cabin. Just 5 days earlier, life had held such promise. She and James had retreated to this rental cabin in the Montana wilderness for what he had called their last adventure before parenthood. An architect from Seattle with a passion for landscape photography, James had insisted on this remote location, despite Rebecca's concerns about her advanced pregnancy. "It's only for a week," he had assured her, his charming smile melting her reservations as it always did. "The place has good reviews, there's a hospital within 40 miles, and the weather forecast looks clear. It'll be the perfect time for us to connect before the baby arrives." The first 3 days had been idyllic: crackling fires, stunning mountain vistas, and intimate conversations about their future daughter, whom they planned to name Lily. But yesterday, James had grown inexplicably distant. He'd spent hours on his phone despite the spotty service, stepping outside for whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when Rebecca approached. When she questioned him, he blamed work stress and a potential problem with their mortgage approval for the new house they'd put an offer on. Then, this morning, the storm had arrived with unexpected ferocity, days ahead of meteorological predictions. And James, reliable, steady James, had packed a bag, taken their SUV, and vanished down the mountain road, leaving his 8 months pregnant wife alone in a rapidly intensifying blizzard. Rebecca moved to the frost-covered window, watching the relentless snowfall obliterate any trace of the tire tracks James had left behind. The rental cabin's owner had stocked some emergency supplies, but a quick inventory confirmed her fears. 3 days of food at best, if carefully rationed, and barely enough firewood to last through the night. The generator providing electricity was already sputtering intermittently as the storm intensified. Her phone showed no service bars, and the landline had gone dead hours ago. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, an impossible journey on foot for anyone, let alone a woman, in her 3rd trimester. The panic she'd been suppressing threatened to overwhelm her as another contraction, the 4th in 2 hours, tightened across her abdomen. "This isn't labor," she whispered fiercely to herself. "It's just stress. Braxton Hicks. It has to be." But the rational part of her mind, the part that had excelled through medical school before she'd switched to hospital administration, recognized the warning signs. Stress and extreme cold could trigger preterm labor, and without help, a premature birth in these conditions would likely be fatal for both her and the baby. Less than a mile away, Alexander Blackwood frowned at the monitor showing Rebecca's cabin. His mountain compound, stretching across 5,000 acres of prime wilderness, was protected by cutting-edge security that had detected the couple's arrival 5 days ago. Normally, Blackwood paid little attention to the occasional hikers, or the renters who occupied the handful of cabins bordering his property. His security chief handled any concerns. But the approaching storm had triggered enhanced surveillance protocols, and now the abandoned woman's predicament played out on his screens like some twisted reality show. At 52, Blackwood had built Blackwood Enterprises from a garage startup into a tech empire worth billions. His innovations in satellite communications and remote monitoring systems had revolutionized global emergency response capabilities. Ironically, the same technology that had made him one of the wealthiest men in America had also driven him into seclusion after a devastating personal loss 3 years earlier, a loss that still haunted him and had driven him to this remote compound where human contact was limited to his small staff of trusted employees. "Sir, I've identified the subjects," reported Meera Patel, his head of security, placing a tablet before him. "Rebecca and James Chen from Seattle. He's an architect with Meridian Design Group. She's a hospital administrator at Northwest Medical. Currently on maternity leave. Married 4 years. Property records show they're in the process of purchasing a home in Bellevue. Credit reports show substantial savings, but also recent large withdrawals from their joint accounts. All initiated by the husband." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Run a deeper background check on him. Nobody abandons their pregnant wife in a killer. Storm for no reason, and get Elena on standby with the medical suite." He hesitated, fingers drumming on the polished desk surface. "What's the status of the service roads?" "The main access road is already impassable," Meera replied, her expression grim. "The northern service road is still navigable with the specialized vehicles, but only for another hour at most before the drifts make it too dangerous. If you're considering intervention, the window is closing rapidly." Blackwood stood abruptly, moving closer to the wall of monitors. The woman inside the cabin had begun methodically gathering supplies near the fireplace, her movements deliberate despite the obvious fear on her face. There was something in her composed efficiency that struck a chord with him, a familiar resilience he hadn't witnessed in years. "Get the medical snowcat ready," he ordered, surprising himself almost as much as Meera, whose professional composure briefly faltered. "Sir, you haven't left the compound in—" "I'm aware of how long it's been, Meera," he cut her off, already moving toward the door. "Sometimes circumstances demand we face our demons. Have Dmitri prep for extreme weather rescue. I'll meet him at the vehicle bay in 10 minutes. As Blackwood strode through the compound's hushed corridors toward his quarters to change into suitable gear, memories he'd spent years suppressing surged forward. Another pregnant woman, another snowstorm, another failure he couldn't bear to repeat. Back in the cabin, Rebecca had managed to build up the fire and was now wrapping herself in every blanket she could find. The contractions were coming more frequently now, every 20 minutes, and she could no longer deny the reality of her situation. She was in the early stages of labor, alone in a blizzard, with temperatures plummeting and resources dwindling. By the hour, "Why, James," she whispered, tears finally breaking through her determined composure, "what could possibly be worth this?" As darkness fell and the storm reached its howling peak, Rebecca closed her eyes, one hand protectively covering her belly where her daughter kicked restlessly, seemingly aware of her mother's distress. "It's just you and me now, Lily," she murmured, "and I promise I will find a way for us to survive this." Outside, the wind screamed around the cabin's sturdy walls, snow piling higher against the windows, while somewhere in the whiteout conditions, a specialized vehicle carrying an unlikely rescuer fought its way toward her through the deepening. Drifts, racing against time and the unforgiving fury of nature, Alexander Blackwood methodically checked his survival gear as the specialized snowcat rumbled through the blizzard. Beside him, Dmitry Kozlov, his head of mountain security and former Russian Special Forces medic, expertly navigated the treacherous terrain. The vehicle's reinforced chassis and massive tracks made it one of the few machines capable of traversing these conditions. But even it struggled against nature's fury. 3 years, sir, Dmitry observed quietly, his accent thickening under stress. 3 years since you last left the compound. Blackwood didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the GPS display showing their approach to the cabin. The glowing dot representing Rebecca Chen hadn't moved. Either she was wisely conserving energy or, he pushed away the alternative, he hadn't ventured beyond his secure perimeter since Elise and their unborn son had died in circumstances disturbingly similar to what was unfolding now. You never told me why, Dmitry continued, unfazed by his employer's silence. Why break your isolation for a stranger? Because I couldn't save them, Blackwood finally answered, his voice barely audible above the howling wind and the engine's steady growl. And I'm not certain I can save her either, but I have to try. In the cabin, Rebecca fought against panic as another contraction gripped her stronger than the last. 20 minutes between contractions had become 15, then 12. Early labor was progressing to active labor. Lily was coming ready or not, in the middle of the worst blizzard in decades. Rebecca had gathered what supplies she could find. Clean, towels, a first aid kit with disappointingly little inside, bottled water and a sharp knife she'd sterilized in the fireplace flames. The medical professional in her recognized the inadequacy of these preparations for an emergency birth, especially a premature one. This isn't how your story begins, Lily, she whispered, rubbing her swollen belly as the contractions subsided. Not in a freezing cabin, alone in a blizzard. I refuse. She hobbled to the window, pressing her forehead against the icy glass. The darkness outside was absolute, snow accumulating past the bottom window frame. Even if the storm ended now, she'd be trapped for days. The hospital 40 miles away might as well be on another planet. Rebecca returned to the fire, adding one of the few remaining logs. As the flames temporarily brightened, her gaze fell on James's abandoned camera bag. He'd left in such haste that he'd forgotten his precious Nikon and lenses, equipment worth thousands that he normally guarded obsessively. Acting on instinct, she pulled the bag closer and unzipped the side pocket where James typically kept memory. Cards. Inside, she found something unexpected, a thumb drive labeled Insurance. Curiosity momentarily overshadowing her fear, Rebecca retrieved her laptop from her duffel bag. The battery showed 42%, not much, but enough. The thumb drive contained a single encrypted folder. The password field glared at her blankly. She tried. Their anniversary date, James's birthday, their address, all failed. A contraction interrupted her efforts, stronger than before. When it passed, leaving her gasping, inspiration struck. She typed Meridian Design, and the folder unlocked. What she found stole her breath more effectively than any contraction. Financial. Records, emails, building specifications with deliberate calculation errors, bribes tracked in meticulous spreadsheets. Evidence that James and several partners at Meridian Design had been systematically cutting corners on materials while falsifying. Safety inspections on multiple commercial projects across Seattle. "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered, scrolling through damning document after document. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. People could die if these buildings failed during an earthquake or fire. James wasn't just running from a storm or their marriage. He was running from prosecution, possibly even manslaughter charges, when the inevitable happened. Her revelation was interrupted by a sound cutting through the storm's roar, a mechanical rumbling growing steadily louder. Headlights swept across. The snow-covered windows illuminating the cabin's interior with an otherworldly glow. Rebecca struggled to her feet, hope and suspicion warring within her. Had James returned, or was it someone else, friend or foe? In her precarious situation, she couldn't afford to assume the best. She extinguished the laptop and shoved it under a cushion, then grabbed the fireplace poker, a ridiculously inadequate weapon, but the only one available. Another contraction seized her just as a heavy knock sounded at the door, doubling her over in pain. "Rebecca Chen?" A deep voice called through the wood. "My name is Alexander Blackwood. I own the property adjacent to this cabin. I've come to help you." Rebecca braced herself against the wall, the poker still clutched in one hand. "How do you know my name?" she demanded, voice strained from the receding contraction. "And why would you be out in this storm?" There was a pause before the voice answered. "I have security monitoring systems. I saw your husband leave. You're in labor, and neither of you will survive the night without medical assistance. Please, open the door." Outside, Blackwood waited, snow accumulating on his shoulders, his past and present colliding as history threatened to repeat itself in the worst possible way. Rebecca hesitated, her instincts as a hospital administrator screaming, a caution even as another contraction began building. Blackwood, if that's who he really was, knew her name, knew she was in labor, and claimed to have surveillance systems watching her cabin. In normal circumstances, these would be terrifying red flags. But these weren't normal circumstances. "I'm going to open the door," she called out, decision made, "but I have a weapon." The claim was laughable, a fireplace poker against whatever a potential predator might carry, but it was all she had. Rebecca unbolted the door, bracing herself against the wall as wind and snow immediately assaulted the opening. Through the white haze stood a tall figure in expensive Arctic gear, accompanied by a broad-shouldered man carrying what looked like medical equipment. "May we enter?" Blackwood asked formally, snow crusting his beard. His eyes, startlingly blue against his wind-burned face, assessed her condition instantly, lingering on her clearly laboring posture. Rebecca nodded, stepping back as another contraction seized her, stronger than before. The two men moved swiftly inside, closing the door against the storm's fury. The larger man immediately began unpacking his gear while Blackwood approached Rebecca with careful, measured steps. "I'm Alexander Blackwood. This is Dmitry Kozlov, former combat medic with emergency obstetrics training." His tone was clipped, businesslike. "Your contractions, how far apart?" 8 to 10 minutes, Rebecca gasped as the pain receded. "Getting stronger. My water hasn't broken yet. I'm approximately 3 weeks premature." Something flickered in Blackwood's expression, surprise perhaps at her clinical self-assessment. "I'm a hospital administrator," she explained, reading. His reaction. "Previously in medical school, before switching to healthcare management, I know enough to understand how dire this situation is." Dmitry approached with a portable medical monitor. "I need to check your vitals and the baby's heartbeat." "Mrs. Chen, with your permission." Rebecca nodded, allowing herself to be guided to the couch. As Dmitry worked, Blackwood moved efficiently around the cabin, adding wood to the dying fire and retrieving additional blankets from the bedroom. "The thumb drive," Rebecca said suddenly, remembering. "My husband, he's involved in something criminal. Building fraud, falsifying safety inspections." Blackwood paused, his expression hardening. "That explains his hasty departure. Mira flagged unusual financial activity." "Mira, my head of security." Blackwood hesitated, then continued. "Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand your situation. This storm has closed all roads. Helicopters can't fly in these conditions. Your labor is progressing rapidly. We have 3 options, none ideal." Rebecca met his gaze, appreciating his directness. "Let's hear them." "First option. We attempt to transport you to my compound's medical facility. It's fully equipped but would Mean traveling through extreme conditions, risking both your lives. Second option, we stay here and Dimitri delivers your baby with the limited equipment we brought. The cabin is losing heat, and your premature child would face significant challenges. Rebecca swallowed hard. And third, we activate my emergency response protocol. It would evacuate critical cases via specialized transport, but Blackwood's voice faltered for the first time. The nearest system is in Missoula. It would take at least 40 minutes to arrive, and I can't guarantee the landing zone would remain clear enough in this storm. Another contraction interrupted her response, this one causing her to cry out. Dimitri looked up from the monitor, his expression grave. Baby's heartbeat is strong, but showing early signs of distress. Your blood pressure is elevated, not dangerously yet, but concerning. Her water hasn't broken? Blackwood asked. No, Dimitri confirmed. We still have some time, but not much. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, her decision was made. Your compound, it's our best chance. She met Blackwood's gaze with steely determination. I'm assuming you wouldn't have offered if you didn't think it was possible. Something shifted in Blackwood's expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. The snowcat can make it, but the journey will be difficult. Every bump, every jolt. I understand the risks, Rebecca interrupted, but I refuse to let my daughter's first moments be in a freezing cabin or inside some experimental transport that might not even land. She leaned forward, wincing as another contraction built. Mr. Blackwood, why are you doing this? The truth, please. Blackwood turned away, staring into the fire. For a moment, Rebecca thought he wouldn't answer. 3 years ago, he finally said, voice low, my wife Elise was 8 months pregnant with our son. We were traveling through a storm, not unlike this one when our vehicle went off the road. By the time help reached us, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered. Blackwood turned back, his face composed once more. Prepare what you want to bring. We leave in 5 minutes. As Dimitri helped Rebecca gather essentials and bundle up for the treacherous journey, Blackwood stepped outside to check the snowcat. In the brief moment of solitude, he pressed his gloved hand against his face, fighting back memories of another night, another failed rescue. Not this time, he vowed to the uncaring storm. Not this time. Inside, Rebecca slipped her laptop with the incriminating thumb drive into her go-bag. Whatever happened tonight, James would answer for his betrayal, both personal and professional. But first, she had a daughter to deliver safely into this world, with the unlikely help of a billionaire haunted by his own ghosts. I'm ready, she told Dimitri, straightening with newfound resolve. Let's go. Outside, the storm raged on, unaware and uncaring of the human drama unfolding within its frozen grip. The snowcat's engines rumbled to life, a mechanical beast preparing to challenge nature itself in a race against time, driven by a man determined not to let history repeat itself. Time seemed to compress and expand simultaneously in the snowcat's confined space. Rebecca's world narrowed to the rhythm of contractions, the steady voice of Dr. Elena through the tablet, and Alex's unwavering presence beside her. He had surprised her by staying, offering his hand when Dimitri needed both of his for the delivery. Preparations. 10 centimeters, Dimitri announced after checking her again. It's time to push with the next contraction. Rebecca nodded, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill that had begun to creep into the vehicle as the outside temperature continued to plummet. The snowcat's heating system worked valiantly against conditions it had never been designed to counter. Systems report, Alex called to Mira through the communicator, his voice steady even as Rebecca crushed his hand with her next contraction. Auxiliary power at 78%, Mira's voice replied. External temperature now at -42 with wind chill, storm intensifying. Satellite data shows no break in the system for at least 6 hours. Rebecca barely registered this concerning report as she focused on Dr. Elena's guidance. Deep breath in and push with the contraction, not against it, the doctor instructed. That's it, Rebecca. You're doing wonderfully. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of effort, pain, and determination. Outside, the storm reached new heights of fury, the wind screaming around the snowcat's frame like a living entity demanding entrance. Inside, a much more ancient and powerful force of nature was taking its course. I can see the head, Dmitri reported, his professional demeanor momentarily breaking into genuine awe. One more push, Rebecca. Something in Alex's posture changed, a subtle shift from tension to alertness. Rebecca, he said quietly, still holding her hand. The radio just picked up another signal. There's another vehicle out in this storm. She had no time to process this information as the final contraction. Built, stronger than any before, with a cry that rose above the storm's howl, Rebecca gave one last monumental push, the snowcat filled with the indignant wail of a newborn taking her first breath. She's here, Dmitri announced, his voice thick with emotion as he quickly cleared the baby's airways and wrapped her in a special thermal blanket. Small but strong, Lily, Rebecca whispered as Dmitri placed the tiny red-faced bundle on her chest. Despite being premature, the baby had a surprisingly robust cry and a shock of dark hair plastered to her head. Hello, little fighter. The moment of wonder was interrupted by the vehicle's proximity alert system blaring to life. Alex released Rebecca's hand and moved swiftly to the front console. Approaching vehicle, Mira reported. SUV, chains on tires, moving erratically. Approximately half a mile south and closing. Alex's expression hardened as he studied the radar display. Configuration matches the vehicle description from the cabin. It's James Chen. Rebecca looked up from Lily's face, disbelief mingling with anger. James? How could he possibly? The storm drove him off the mountain road, Alex theorized, his voice cold. He's likely lost, possibly returning to the cabin in desperation. His navigation system could have told him about this plateau, Dmitri suggested, as he continued monitoring both mother and baby's vitals. It's marked as a safe zone on most GPS systems. Alex turned to Rebecca, his expression unreadable. Your husband is about to arrive. What do you want to do? Rebecca looked down at Lily, so tiny and perfect, despite the chaos of her entry into the world, then back to Alex. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared trauma transformed into strength. Let him come, she said firmly. I want him to see what he abandoned, and then I want him to face the consequences of everything he's done. Alex nodded once, then opened a compartment beneath the driver's seat, removing what appeared to be a high-tech firearm. Seeing Rebecca's alarmed expression, he clarified, tranquilizer, non-lethal but effective. After leaving you in these conditions, I'm not taking chances with him. The SUV's headlights appeared through the snow curtain, weaving drunkenly before coming to a stop 30 feet from the snowcat. For several moments, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a figure stumbled out into the storm, struggling against the wind toward the larger vehicle. Alex opened the snowcat's door. A crack, the tranquilizer raised but not yet aimed. That's far enough, James Chen, he called out. The figure stopped, snow immediately accumulating on his inadequate coat. Who the hell are you? James shouted, his voice barely audible above the wind. How do you know my name? The better question, Alex replied, is why you abandoned your wife and unborn child in a blizzard, but perhaps we should discuss that inside, unless you prefer freezing to death. James hesitated, visibly weighing his options before the bitter cold made the decision. For him, he staggered the remaining distance, and Alex reluctantly stepped back, allowing him into the snowcat while keeping the tranquilizer ready. The moment James entered, his eyes landed on Rebecca, cradling Lily. His face went through a rapid series of expressions, shock, confusion, and finally a calculating assessment that revealed more about his character than any words could have. "Rebecca," he began, his tone conciliatory, rehearsed. "Thank God you're—" "Save it," she interrupted, her voice quiet but razor-sharp. "I found the thumb drive, James. I know everything." The color drained from his face. Behind him, Alex quietly engaged the Snowcat security lockdown protocol with a few taps on his wrist device. "I can explain," James started, desperation creeping into his voice. "It wasn't my— She was born 10 minutes ago," Rebecca continued as if he hadn't spoken, looking down at Lily. "Your daughter, who you left to die along with me." She looked back up, meeting his eyes with cold fury. "But that's not even your— Worst crime, is it?" Outside, the storm continued its assault, nature's fury providing a fitting backdrop to the human drama unfolding within the Snowcat's confines. 3 adults, 1 newborn, and enough secrets and betrayals to fill volumes, all trapped together in a metal box on a mountain plateau, while the worst blizzard in decades raged on, indifferent to the momentous shifts in the lives it had thrown. Together, the interior of the Snowcat crackled with tension. James stood dripping melted snow onto the floor, his eyes darting between Rebecca with the newborn, Dimitri's watchful stance, and Alex's unwavering aim with the tranquilizer. Outside, the storm's howl provided an appropriate soundtrack to the human drama unfolding within. "You need to hear me out," James pleaded, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "This isn't what it looks like. Abandoning your 8 months pregnant wife during a blizzard looks exactly like what it is," Alex stated coldly. "Criminal negligence at minimum, attempted murder at worst." "Who are you anyway?" James demanded, a flash of indignation breaking through his facade of contrition. His gaze lingered on the high-tech equipment filling the vehicle. "Some kind of government agent?" "Alexander Blackwood," Alex replied, watching recognition dawn on James's face. "The tech billionaire? The recluse?" James's expression shifted, calculation replacing fear as he processed this unexpected development. "Look, Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate you helping Rebecca, but this is a private family matter, a misunderstanding—" "Family," Rebecca interrupted, her voice gaining strength despite her exhaustion. "You forfeited any right to that word when you left us to die." She adjusted her hold on Lily, who had fallen asleep against her chest, blissfully unaware of the confrontation surrounding her birth. "Tell me, James, were we just collateral damage in your escape plan, or was getting rid of us part of your strategy all along?" James flinched as if struck. "That's not fair. I panicked, yes, but I never meant for you to—" "To what? Die? What exactly did you think would happen to us in that cabin, with no vehicle, dwindling supplies, and a blizzard closing in?" The calm in Rebecca's voice was more damning than any shouting could have been. "Or maybe you just didn't think about us at all." "I came back, didn't I?" James snapped, defensive anger flaring. "I realized my mistake. I was trying to fix it." "More likely your escape route was blocked by the storm," Alex observed dispassionately. "The roads to the north and east have been impassable for hours. Your only option was to return the way you came." James' expression confirmed this assessment, though he quickly attempted to recover. "That doesn't change the fact that I came back for my wife and child." "After your daughter was already born," Dimitri noted quietly from where he continued monitoring. "Rebecca and Lily's vitals. Born safely despite your actions, not because of them. The Cascade Towers project," Rebecca said suddenly, changing tactics. 32 stories, set to open next month. How many support beams were swapped for substandard materials? How many inspections were falsified? James went completely still, color draining from his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." 6 support columns, Rebecca continued calmly. Concrete mixed with excessive sand to cut costs, earthquake safety features documented but never installed, all meticulously recorded in your files, along with the bribes paid to keep inspectors quiet. She met his gaze steadily. How many people would have died when, not if, that building failed? Those files are encrypted, James whispered, a bead of sweat trailing down his temple despite the cold. Were encrypted, Rebecca corrected. I found your password, Meridian Design. Not exactly cryptographic genius, James. Alex watched this exchange with growing respect for Rebecca's composure. Despite having just given birth under extreme conditions, she was methodically dismantling her husband's defenses with surgical precision. You don't understand the pressure, James said, switching to a pleading tone. The firm was going to collapse. We were going to lose everything. It started small, cutting corners on materials here, fudging an inspection there, but then it snowballed. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Yet you were willing to risk thousands of lives, Alex interjected. Office workers, residents, visitors, all potentially buried under rubble because your firm couldn't manage its finances properly. James shot him a venomous glance. What would you know about it? Billionaires like you don't live in the real world where people have to make hard choices to survive. No? Alex agreed, his voice suddenly distant. My hard choices tend to involve different stakes. His eyes briefly met Rebecca's before returning to James. But unlike you, I face the consequences of my decisions. I don't run from them. The satellite communicator crackled to life, interrupting the tense exchange. Alex, urgent update, Mira's voice reported. Seattle PD just issued an APB for James Chen. The FBI has joined the investigation, apparently a whistleblower at Meridian. Design came forward yesterday with corroborating evidence of the construction fraud. James sagged against the wall, the last of his bravado evaporating. Marcus, he muttered. I knew he was getting cold feet. They know about your withdrawal of funds and flight, Mira continued. They're treating it as admission of guilt and evidence of prior knowledge. They've labeled you a fugitive, which explains your desperation to escape, Rebecca concluded, the final pieces clicking into place. You weren't just running from an investigation that might happen. You were running from one already underway. She shook her head slowly. And I was nothing but an inconvenient complication to your escape plan. Rebecca, please! James took a step toward her, desperation in every line of his body. We can fix this together. We can take the money and disappear, start fresh somewhere. With Lily. You're not touching my daughter, Rebecca stated with quiet ferocity. Not now, not ever. Alex moved smoothly between them, the tranquilizer still ready. I suggest you sit down, Mr. Chen. The authorities have been notified of your location. Once the storm clears enough for air transport, you'll be taken into custody. James's eyes darted around the snowcat, assessing escape options. Finding none, his shoulders slumped in defeat. This is your fault, he accused Rebecca, bitterness replacing his earlier conciliatory tone. If you hadn't been so insistent about having a baby right away, I wouldn't have been under so much pressure to provide. We could have waited, built up our savings. Ah, yes, Rebecca interrupted, her tone acid, because clearly your criminal activities are the fault of your pregnant wife and unborn child. She looked at him with something approaching pity. You know what's truly pathetic, James. Even now, you can't take responsibility for your own choices. Lily stirred against Rebecca's chest, small face scrunching as she began to fuss. The sound seemed to break something in James. He sank onto a bench, head in his hands. Dimitri moved forward with a medical kit. The baby needs her first checkup, and you need attention too, Rebecca. Your blood pressure is still elevated. As Dimitri began his examination, Alex turned to the communications console, speaking quietly with Mira about the logistics of handing James over to authorities once the storm abated. The immediate confrontation had ended, but the situation remained precarious. On multiple fronts, Rebecca looked down at Lily, now awake and staring up with unfocused dark eyes. Such a tiny, perfect being, born amid such chaos and betrayal. A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over her. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges lay ahead, she would ensure her daughter grew up safe, loved, and surrounded by people of integrity. Her gaze drifted to Alex, who was now studying weather patterns on one of the monitors, his profile illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. A man who had faced his own devastating loss, yet found the courage to venture back into the world, into a blizzard no less, to save strangers. There was a lesson in that, something about resilience and the human capacity for renewal that resonated deeply with her current circumstances. The snowcat's interior had warmed again as the auxiliary heating system adjusted to the additional occupant. Outside, the storm's fury showed its first hint of diminishing, the howling winds decreasing incrementally to merely terrifying rather than apocalyptic. "The worst is passing," Alex noted, catching her gaze. "Both the storm and other matters." He glanced meaningfully at James, who sat in defeated silence. "What happens now?" Rebecca asked softly. "Not just about the immediate situation, but everything beyond." Alex seemed to understand the broader question. "Now," he replied with equal softness, "you rest and recover. You focus on Lily. The rest, James, the fraud investigation, your future plans, all of that can wait until you're both safe and stable." "And where will that be?" she pressed. "The cabin is compromised, and I doubt I'll feel particularly welcome returning to Seattle given what James has done." Alex hesitated, clearly weighing his words carefully. "My compound has a guest residence, self-contained, private, with access to medical facilities. It was built for someone who never had the chance to use it." Pain flickered briefly across his features. "It's yours for as long as you need." The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Not charity, not pity, but something closer to understanding. One survivor recognizing another. "Thank you," Rebecca said, simply knowing that no elaborate expression of gratitude could adequately convey what his intervention had meant. "For everything." As if in response, the storm outside quieted further, the howling giving way to a steady but less threatening wind. The worst had indeed passed. What remained now was the delicate, complex process of rebuilding from the wreckage, both literal and figurative, that James had left in his wake. Lily's tiny hand escaped her blanket, 5 perfect fingers splayed against the world. Rebecca gently tucked it back in, marveling at how something so small could represent such immense possibility. Her daughter's story was just beginning, not defined by the circumstances of her birth or her father's betrayal, but by all the choices that lay ahead. And for the first time since finding James's note in that cold cabin, Rebecca felt something unexpected unfurl within her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but its essential precursor. The quiet certainty that whatever came next, she and Lily would not face it alone. 3 hours passed in tense silence. James remained seated in his corner, a study in defeated calculation, occasionally glancing at Rebecca and Lily with expressions that fluctuated between resentment and regret. Rebecca had managed to doze intermittently, her body demanding rest. After the trauma of childbirth, while Dmitri monitored mother and baby with quiet efficiency, Alex divided his attention between the communications console and the weather monitors, exchanging occasional updates with Mira at the compound. The storm had begun its slow retreat, winds decreasing from devastating to merely dangerous. Visibility had improved enough that the first faint glow of dawn could be detected on the eastern horizon. "We have a window," Alex announced, studying the latest satellite imagery. The FBI has authorized an emergency extraction team, ETA 30 minutes to our position. James's head snapped up. FBI, I thought local police. Construction fraud involving federal buildings elevates the case, Alex interrupted. The Seattle Federal Courthouse was among your projects, according to Mira's research. James slumped back, the last vestige of hope visibly draining from him. Rebecca stirred at the conversation, shifting Lily in her arms. The newborn had proven remarkably resilient, nursing well despite her premature arrival and the challenging circumstances. Dmitri had declared her impressively strong-willed, a description that had brought the first genuine smile to Rebecca's exhausted face. "How are you feeling?" Alex asked, moving to check on them. "Like I gave birth in a snowstorm," Rebecca replied with unexpected dry humor, "but we're both stable." She glanced toward James, then back to Alex, lowering her voice. "What happens with him?" "He'll be taken directly into federal custody," Alex explained quietly. "The evidence from your laptop, combined with the whistleblowers' testimony, ensures he won't see freedom for quite some time." Rebecca nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. Not satisfaction exactly, but resolution, the closing of one painful chapter. "And us?" she asked, echoing her earlier question. "Your offer of the guest residence stands without conditions or expiration date," Alex finished. "Stay as long as you wish, whether that's days or longer." Something unspoken passed between them, not a promise, not yet, but a recognition of possibility. Two broken people who had found unexpected connection amid crisis, both carrying pasts, marked by betrayal and loss. The Snowcat's communication system crackled. "Extraction team inbound," Mira reported. 5 minutes out." Rebecca suddenly tensed, her gaze fixed on James. "He's planning something." Alex turned sharply. James had indeed shifted posture, his body coiled with new tension, eyes tracking the exits with predatory focus. "Mr. Chen," Alex said evenly, "I wouldn't advise whatever you're considering." James's laugh was hollow. "What exactly do I have to lose at this point? Prison for the next 20 years, my career destroyed, my reputation ruined." "Your chance to ever make amends to your daughter," Rebecca answered steadily. "Right now you're a fraud and a coward who abandoned his family. Is violent fugitive really the final label you want to add to that legacy?" James faltered, his gaze dropping to Lily's sleeping form. The distinctive whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors became audible over the diminished storm, growing louder as powerful searchlights swept the plateau. "Your choice, James," Rebecca continued, her voice gaining strength. "Face the consequences of your actions with whatever dignity you can muster, or compound your mistakes and ensure Lily grows up knowing her father as nothing but a criminal who chose escape over responsibility at every turn." The tension stretched between them until finally James's shoulders slumped. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender just as the helicopter touched down 50 yards from the Snowcat, its rotors sending swirls of snow dancing across the plateau. 4 figures in FBI windbreakers emerged, approaching with weapons drawn. Alex opened the Snowcat's door, identifying himself and the situation. As agents entered to take James into custody, he paused beside Rebecca. "I never wanted it to end this way," he said quietly. "No," Rebecca agreed, meeting his eyes one final time. "You just never considered any ending but your own." As James was led away in handcuffs, Rebecca felt no triumph, only a profound weariness mingled with an unexpected sense of liberation. One chapter closing, another beginning. Dawn broke fully across the mountain, golden light streaming through the Snowcat's windows. Alex returned from conferring with the FBI team, his expression lighter than she'd yet seen it. "Ready to go home?" he asked simply. Rebecca looked down at Lily, then back at the man who had risked everything to save them both. "Yes," she replied. I think we are. Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Pristine, difficult, but beautiful in its stark possibility. Much like the future that now lay before them, the helicopter journey to Blackwood's compound took less than 15 minutes. Though to Rebecca, cradling Lily against her chest, it felt both instantaneous and eternal. Exhaustion had claimed her fully now that the immediate danger had passed, her body's desperate need for recovery asserting itself despite the juddering vibrations of the aircraft. Alex sat across from her, his attention divided between monitoring the pilot's navigation and keeping a watchful eye on mother and child. Dimitri remained beside Rebecca, medical kit at the ready, though Lily had proven remarkably stable for a premature newborn born under such extreme circumstances. 3 minutes to landing, the pilot announced over the intercom. Rebecca roused, herself from semi-consciousness, peering through the helicopter's window. Below, a stunning architectural marvel emerged from the mountainside, Alex's legendary compound, the subject of endless speculation in tech circles and the media. Most had described it as a fortress, a billionaire's bunker, but from the air it appeared more like an extension of the mountain itself, elegant glass and stone structures nestled harmoniously into the natural landscape. "It's beautiful," she murmured, surprised. "Not what I expected." Alex's expression softened slightly. "Most expect concrete walls and guard towers. I wanted something that belonged to the mountain, not something imposed upon it." The helicopter descended onto a landing pad adjacent to what appeared to be the main residence. Even before the rotors began to slow, Rebecca could see a small, welcoming party emerging from the building, medical personnel with a gurney and what she assumed were core staff members. "Standard protocol," Alex explained, noting her sudden tension. "Everyone here has signed extensive confidentiality agreements. Your privacy is absolute." The helicopter touched down with barely a bump, testament to the pilot's skill. The door slid open, and organized efficiency took over. Rebecca found herself and Lily being gently transferred to the waiting medical team, Dimitri providing a concise briefing on their condition. Despite her medical background and usual self-sufficiency, Rebecca surrendered to their care without protest, her body's demands too insistent to ignore. "I'll be right behind you," Alex assured her as the medical team began moving toward the building. "Elena will take excellent care of you both." The next few hours passed in a haze of medical examinations, warm baths, clean clothes, and finally, a bedroom suite that defied Rebecca's exhausted imagination. Tastefully furnished in soothing blues and creams, it featured a hospital-grade bassinet for Lily, positioned near a king-sized bed, with what felt like a cloud for a mattress. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a stunning mountain vista, though privacy screens could be activated with a touch. "You are remarkably healthy considering what you've been through," Dr. Elena concluded after her thorough examination. "And your daughter is a medical marvel. 5 weeks premature, but with the vitals of a full-term infant. I'd like to keep her on monitoring for the next 24 hours, but I don't anticipate complications." After the medical team departed, promising to return for regular checks, Rebecca found herself alone with Lily for the first time since the birth. The newborn slept peacefully in her bassinet, tiny chest rising and falling with reassuring regularity. Rebecca herself lay propped against pillows, clean and comfortable, but unable to surrender to sleep despite her exhaustion. Too much had happened too quickly. Her mind couldn't settle. A gentle knock at the door preceded Alex's entrance. He had changed from his snow gear into casual attire, dark jeans and a simple grey sweater that somehow made him look more human and approachable than the commanding presence who had orchestrated their rescue. "May I come in?" he asked, remaining at the threshold despite having already knocked. Rebecca nodded, grateful for the distraction from her churning thoughts. "How are you feeling?" he asked, approaching but maintaining a respectful distance. "Like, I've lived several lifetimes in the past 24 hours, she answered honestly. "Physically, surprisingly well. Emotionally." She trailed off, unable to categorize the complex storm of feelings. Alex nodded in understanding. "I've never given birth in a blizzard, but I'm familiar with having your life completely upended in a single day." The simple acknowledgement of shared trauma, however different their experiences, created a momentary bridge between them. "James?" she asked, surprising herself with how detached she felt saying his name. "In FBI custody," Alex confirmed. "They'll want your statement eventually, but not immediately." "I've made sure of that," Rebecca nodded gratefully. "And the evidence?" "Secured and authenticated. Mira transmitted copies to the FBI's cybercrime division before we even left the Snowcat." He hesitated, then added, "Your financial situation, the money James withdrew, we can help trace and recover what's legally yours." "I hadn't even thought about money," Rebecca admitted, the practical realities of single motherhood suddenly looming. Her maternity leave from the hospital had barely begun, and now she faced a future very different from the one she'd planned. As if reading her thoughts, Alex spoke carefully. "You have choices, Rebecca. More than might be apparent right now. There's no pressure to make decisions immediately." She studied him, this enigmatic man who had risked everything to save her and Lily. "Why did you really come for us, Alex?" "The truth." He moved to the window, gazing out at the mountains for a long moment before answering. 3 years ago, my wife Elise and I were returning from her final prenatal appointment when our car was forced off the road in a snowstorm. The impact triggered early labor." His voice remained steady, but Rebecca could see the tension in his shoulders. "I managed to call for help, but the conditions were too severe for immediate rescue. I delivered our son myself, but he was too early, too fragile. He lived for 17 minutes. Elise hemorrhaged. By the time help arrived," he turned back to face her. "When I saw you on the security feeds, abandoned and in labor during a blizzard, it wasn't just déjà vu. It was a second chance, not to change my past, but to ensure someone else's future didn't end the way mine did." The raw honesty of his confession hung in the air between them. Not pity, not charity, but a recognition of shared human vulnerability and resilience. "Thank you," Rebecca said simply, words inadequate for the magnitude of what he had done. Alex nodded once, then glanced at Lily's bassinet. "She's remarkable, like her mother." The compliment brought unexpected warmth to Rebecca's cheeks. "We still have a long road ahead." "Yes," he agreed, "but not one you have to walk alone unless you choose to." He moved toward the door. "Rest now. Everything else can wait." As the door closed quietly behind him, Rebecca felt some of her mental turbulence begin to settle. Outside, the morning sun illuminated a transformed landscape. Pristine snow covering the violence of the storm, a blank canvas waiting for new beginnings. Lily stirred in her bassinet, small face scrunching before relaxing again into peaceful sleep. Rebecca reached out, gently touching her daughter's tiny hand. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, and for the first time since finding James's note, she truly believed it. 3 days passed in a peaceful rhythm that felt surreal after the chaos that had preceded it. Rebecca's body began its gradual recovery, her strength returning incrementally with each passing hour. Lily continued to thrive despite her premature arrival, gaining weight and demonstrating what Dr. Elena called exceptional neurological responses for her gestational age. The guest residence proved to be a self-contained sanctuary within the larger compound, a modernist cabin built of warm wood and glass that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and comforting. Though connected to the main complex, it offered complete privacy, with its own kitchen, living spaces, and a nursery adjacent to the master bedroom that had clearly been designed with loving attention to detail. Rebecca tried not to think about who it had originally been intended for. On the morning of the fourth day, she ventured onto the residence's private terrace while Lily napped under the watchful electronic eye of the compound's monitoring system. The storm had given way to crisp, clear mountain air, the surrounding peaks gleaming white against a perfect blue sky. She wrapped her hands around a mug of herbal tea, savoring the simple pleasure of sunlight on her face. "Good morning," Alex's voice came from the terrace entrance. "May I join you?" Rebecca turned, surprised by how pleased she felt at his appearance. Of course. He carried a tablet and what appeared to be a leather portfolio. Though dressed casually again, there was something about his posture that suggested this wasn't merely a social call. "You look better," he observed, taking the seat across from her. "More rested." "Amazing what actual sleep can do," she replied with a small smile. "Though 4-hour stretches between feedings hardly qualify as a full night's rest. Lily's keeping you on a schedule?" "A demanding one, but she's worth every minute." Rebecca studied him, noting the slight shadows under his eyes. "You, on the other hand, look like you haven't been sleeping at all." A ghost of a smile crossed his face, observant. "I've been dealing with the aftermath of everything." He placed the tablet on the table between them. "There have been developments I thought you should know about." Rebecca's stomach tightened, her brief moment of peace evaporating. "James?" Alex nodded. "The federal investigation has expanded. It turns out the Cascade Towers project wasn't an isolated incident. They've identified at least 7 major buildings with critical safety issues, including a hospital and an elementary school." Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, the magnitude of what James had been involved in washing over her anew. Has anyone been hurt yet?" "No. The FBI ordered immediate structural assessments of all Meridian projects. The buildings in question have been evacuated pending remediation." He paused. "Your evidence was crucial. The thumb drive contained documentation the whistleblower didn't have access to. A complicated mixture of emotions surged through Rebecca: relief that tragedy had been averted, horror at how close it had come, and an unwelcome twist of pain that the man she had married, the father of her child, could have been party to something so unconscionable. "What will happen to him?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. "He's cooperating, apparently, offering testimony against the firm's partners in exchange for consideration during sentencing." Alex's tone remained neutral, clinical. "But given the scope and nature of the fraud, plus the endangerment aspect, he's still facing significant prison time. 10 years minimum, according to the prosecutor I spoke with. 10 years. Lily would be a pre-teen by the time her father emerged from incarceration." The thought should have devastated Rebecca, but instead she felt an odd sense of clarity. The man who had abandoned them in that storm was not someone she wanted influencing her daughter's formative years. "There's more," Alex continued after giving her a moment to process. "Financial matters." He opened the leather portfolio, revealing a series of neatly organized documents. "James withdrew approximately $2.3 million from your joint accounts and various investment vehicles in the week before your trip. The FBI has recovered most of it. He hadn't managed to move it offshore yet. As his spouse, you're entitled to your portion, though some may be held in escrow pending the final resolution of the case." Rebecca stared at the figures on the documents, the numbers swimming before her eyes. Money had never been her primary concern. She and James had lived comfortably on their combined salaries, but she'd never imagined they had accumulated wealth of this magnitude. "I didn't know we had this much," she said finally. "Where did it come from?" Alex's expression hardened slightly. The investigators believe a significant portion represents kickbacks from contractors and suppliers involved in the fraudulent projects. Essentially, illegal profits from the corner cutting. The implication was clear. The money was tainted, possibly subject to forfeiture as proceeds of criminal activity. Rebecca pushed the documents away, suddenly wanting nothing to do with them. I don't want it. Not if it came from putting people's lives at risk. A commendable position, Alex acknowledged, but practically speaking, you have a newborn to support. Your legitimate assets, your salary, your personal savings, your portion of legally obtained joint property should not be affected by the case against James. My legal team can help separate what's rightfully yours from what might be subject to seizure. The mention of support brought Rebecca back to reality with jarring force. She had been living in a cocoon these past days, sheltered from practical concerns by Alex's generosity and the immediacy of Lily's needs. But the real world waited beyond the compound's boundaries, a world where she needed to rebuild a life for herself and her daughter. I need to contact my employer, she said suddenly. The hospital will be wondering where I am, and my parents, they don't even know they have a granddaughter. All taken care of, Alex assured her. With your permission, Mira spoke with your HR department. They're holding your position and have extended your leave given the extraordinary personal circumstances. As for your parents, we've arranged for them to be flown here tomorrow if you feel ready for visitors. The consideration behind these arrangements touched Rebecca deeply, even as it reminded her how dependent she had become on Alex's resources and influence. A faint unease stirred beneath her gratitude. Alex, she began carefully, I'm enormously grateful for everything you've done, but I can't keep imposing on your generosity indefinitely. Lily and I need to start figuring out our next steps. Something flashed in his eyes. Disappointment? Concern? It was gone too quickly to identify. Of course, he said evenly, though I hope you know there's no rush. You're welcome here for as long as you wish to stay. The digital baby monitor on the table chimed softly, indicating Lily was stirring from her nap. Rebecca rose automatically, maternal instincts already finely tuned to her daughter's needs. Think about what you want, Alex said, gathering the documents as he stood. Not what you think you should want, or what others might expect. You've been given a rare opportunity, Rebecca, a genuine fresh start. Some people wait a lifetime for such a chance. As he turned to leave, Rebecca was struck by the loneliness that seemed to follow him like a shadow, a man who had everything except the family he had lost, living in a fortress built to keep the world at bay. Alex, she called after him, will you join us for dinner tonight? Just the three of us? The invitation seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, the carefully maintained composure slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the billionaire's facade, someone who, despite his wealth and power, was as human and vulnerable as anyone. I'd like that, he said simply. As he disappeared back into the main complex, Rebecca turned toward the nursery, where Lily was now fully awake and demanding attention. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges she was only beginning to comprehend. But for the first time since that fateful note in the cabin, she felt something unfamiliar unfurling within her chest, not just determination to survive, but anticipation for what might come next. Sometimes she was beginning to realize the worst storms cleared paths to destinations you never knew you were seeking. 2 weeks after Lily's dramatic birth, Rebecca stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the guest residence, watching snowflakes dance in the morning light. Her body had largely recovered from childbirth, though occasional twinges reminded her of the ordeal. Lily had settled into a more predictable rhythm, gaining weight steadily and displaying what Dr. Elena called an unusually alert demeanor for a newborn, especially one born prematurely. The dinner with Alex had evolved into a nightly ritual. Neither of them acknowledged directly. He would arrive precisely at 7, sometimes bearing books for Lily or small, thoughtful gifts for Rebecca, herbal teas to aid lactation, a cashmere wrap when he noticed her tendency to get cold, journals, for what he called her inevitable middle-of-the-night insights. They would eat together, talk about everything and nothing, and never directly address the growing connection between them or the uncertain future that loomed beyond their mountain sanctuary. Rebecca's parents had come and gone, their initial shock at the circumstances of their granddaughter's birth giving way to profound gratitude toward Alex and barely concealed curiosity about his interest in their daughter. They had tactfully avoided directly asking about Rebecca's plans, though their concerned glances spoke volumes. A soft chime indicated someone at the residence entrance. Too early for Alex's usual evening visit, and Mira always called ahead for any staff-related matters. Curious, Rebecca made her way to the door, Lily sleeping peacefully in the baby sling against her chest. FBI Special Agent Diana Kwan stood in the hallway, her expression professionally neutral despite the obvious surprise at seeing Rebecca wearing the infant. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Special Agent Kwan, leading the financial investigation into Meridian Design Group." She presented her credentials. "I apologize for the unexpected visit, but Mr. Blackwood indicated you were feeling well enough for a brief interview." Rebecca hesitated only momentarily before stepping back. "Please come in, and it's Miss Winters now. I've filed to reclaim my maiden name." Agent Kwan nodded, following Rebecca to the living area where they sat across from each other. "How is your daughter?" she asked, her professional demeanor softening as she glanced at Lily. "Remarkably well, considering her dramatic entrance," Rebecca replied, one hand instinctively resting on Lily's back. "But I suspect you didn't come all this way to discuss my baby." "No," Kwan acknowledged. "I need to ask some difficult questions about your husband, ex-husband, and your knowledge of his activities." For the next hour, Rebecca answered questions about James's behavior, finances, and work habits, describing the changes she'd noticed in the months leading up to his abandonment. She detailed finding the thumb drive and its contents, careful to emphasize that she'd had no prior knowledge of any illegal activities. "I was focused on preparing for the baby," she explained. "James handled our finances. In retrospect, I should have asked more questions about where the money for our new house was coming from, but—" She trailed off, the familiar sting of having been so thoroughly deceived resurfacing. Agent Kwan made notes on her tablet. "You were in the dark, like many spouses of white-collar criminals. What matters is your cooperation now." She looked up. "Which brings me to a delicate matter. James is requesting to see you." Rebecca stiffened. "Why?" "He claims he wants to apologize in person, to explain." Kwan's tone suggested her opinion of this request. "You're under no obligation to agree. I have nothing to say to him." Rebecca replied immediately. "And I don't want him anywhere near Lily." Kwan nodded. "Understood. I'll convey your decision." She hesitated before continuing. "There's one more issue. The prenuptial agreement you signed with James 3 years ago." Rebecca frowned. "What prenuptial agreement? We never signed one." The agent's eyebrows rose slightly. "According to documents submitted by James's attorney, you signed a prenuptial agreement waiving rights to any business assets or proceeds derived from his professional activities." "That's impossible," Rebecca stated flatly. "There was never any prenup. I would remember signing something like that." Kwan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I suspected as much. We'll have our document. Examiners review it, but it appears to be another desperate attempt by James to protect assets." She gathered her materials. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Winters. Your cooperation has been invaluable." After showing Agent Kwan out, Rebecca returned to the windows, her mind churning. James's desperation had driven him to forgery now. A new level of betrayal that somehow still managed to hurt despite everything that had happened. Lost in thought, she didn't hear Alex enter until he spoke from the doorway. "I heard Quan was here." His tone was carefully neutral. "I would have arranged more notice if I'd known she was coming today." Rebecca turned to face him. "It's fine. Better to get it over with." She adjusted Lily gently as the baby stirred. "Though I could have done without learning James is now forging my signature on fake legal documents." Alex's expression darkened. "The prenup? Mira flagged that yesterday from the court filings. We were going to tell you once we'd confirmed it was fraudulent." "We?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Alex, as grateful as I am for everything you've done, I need to start handling my own affairs." He acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Of course, I only meant to help, not to overstep." An uncomfortable silence fell between them, the first since her arrival at the compound. Rebecca recognized it as a crossroads of sorts, the inevitable moment when the bubble of their sheltered existence would begin to face pressure from the real world beyond. "I've been thinking about what comes next," she said finally, moving to sit on one of the couches. "Lily and I need to build our own life, establish our independence." Alex remained by the doorway, something vulnerable flickering across his usually composed features. "I understand. My team can help you find suitable accommodations, arrange security." "That's not what I meant," Rebecca interrupted gently. "I don't want to leave immediately, but I need to know that when we do, it will be on my terms, standing on my own feet." She met his gaze directly. "I can't be another rescued project, Alex. Neither can Lily." He crossed the room then, sitting across from her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. "Is that what you think this is? A rescue mission, isn't it? You saved us from the storm, from James, from financial ruin. You've provided everything we could possibly need." She shifted Lily to her other arm. "But at some point, gratitude becomes complicated. Because you think I expect something in return?" There was no accusation in his voice, only a genuine attempt to understand. "No," Rebecca said honestly, "because I'm afraid of becoming dependent on your generosity, of losing myself in the force field of your wealth and influence." She took a deep breath. "And because whatever is happening between us should develop on equal ground, not with me as your perpetual recipient and you as my benefactor." Alex was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to Lily, who had awakened and was regarding him with solemn dark eyes. When he looked back at Rebecca, his expression had cleared, as if reaching a decision. "What if I offered you a job?" he asked unexpectedly. Rebecca blinked in surprise. "A job?" Blackwood Enterprises has a substantial healthcare division developing remote medical monitoring systems, technology similar to what's been keeping track of Lily's vitals. We need someone with hospital administration experience to liaison between our engineers and healthcare providers, someone who understands both operational logistics and patient needs. His tone became more businesslike. "It's a genuine position, with competitive salary and benefits, including childcare. You're uniquely qualified." The proposal caught Rebecca off guard. It was elegant in its simplicity, a way for her to establish professional and financial independence while remaining close to the security and resources of Alex's world, at least until she and Lily were fully on their feet. "I'd need to see the job description," she said carefully, "and interview properly. No special treatment." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Mira would eviscerate me if I suggested bypassing our hiring protocols, even for you." Something eased in Rebecca's chest, the first step toward a possible future that honored both her need for independence and the undeniable connection that had formed between them. "In that case," she said, "I'd be interested in applying." Alex rose, maintaining the careful distance he always kept. I'll have the details sent to you tomorrow. He moved toward the door, then paused. Rebecca, for what it's worth, I've never seen you as a rescue project. From the moment you insisted on holding that fireplace poker when opening the cabin door, I've seen you as one of the strongest people I've ever met. After he left, Rebecca cradled Lily close, inhaling the perfect, newborn scent of her daughter's head. Outside, fresh snow continued to fall, not in the violent blizzard that had almost claimed their lives, but in the gentle, transformative way that reshapes landscapes one snowflake at a time. "Small steps, Lily," she whispered. "That's how we'll build our new life, one small, independent step at a time." Across the compound, Alex Blackwood stood at his own window, watching the same snowfall, a man accustomed to commanding empires, now learning patience of an entirely different kind. The patience to let someone find their way to him, rather than clearing the path before them. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something dangerous and fragile unfurl in his chest. Hope. 1 month after Lily's birth, Rebecca sat in Blackwood Enterprises' sleek conference room, her professional attire a marked contrast to the casual clothes she'd worn throughout her recovery. Before her sat 3 senior executives from the healthcare division, along with Meera Patel, who'd proven to be not just Alex's head of security, but effectively his chief operating officer. "Your background in hospital operations gives you unique insight into implementation challenges our engineers often miss," said Dr. Lawrence Chen, the division's director. "And your suggestions about patient monitoring protocols align perfectly with our development roadmap." Rebecca maintained her professional composure, though inwardly she felt a surge of satisfaction. She had insisted on a rigorous interview process for the liaison position, refusing any special treatment because of her connection to Alex. He had honored her wishes, recusing himself entirely from the hiring decision. "We'd like to offer you the position," Meera concluded, sliding a folder across the table. "Standard compensation package with the childcare accommodations we discussed. You'd start with a hybrid schedule, 3 days in the office, 2 working remotely, until Lily reaches 6 months. Rebecca reviewed the paperwork carefully. The salary was generous but not extravagant, the benefits comprehensive, the expectations clearly outlined. Nothing suggested preferential treatment or charity disguised as employment. "I'd like to accept," she said, signing the offer letter. "When would you like me to start?" 2 weeks from Monday, Meera replied. "That gives you time to arrange your move to the executive apartments in the North Complex." The North Complex, separate from Alex's private residence, but still within the secure compound. Rebecca had toured the apartments earlier that week. Modern, comfortable living spaces designed for senior staff who needed to remain on site for extended periods. Perfect for her transition to independence without throwing herself and Lily immediately back into the chaotic outside world. Later that afternoon, Rebecca found Alex in the compound's expansive botanical garden, a climate-controlled environment that provided a lush escape from the mountain winter. He sat on a bench near a koi pond, apparently absorbed in work on his tablet, though she suspected he'd been alerted to her approach by the compound's omnipresent security systems. "Congratulations," he said, setting aside his work as she approached. "With Lily in her carrier, Meera tells me you impressed everyone." "Did she also tell you I accepted?" Rebecca asked, settling beside him on the bench. "She did." His expression remained carefully neutral, though she detected a hint of something warmer in his eyes. "The North Apartments will be ready whenever you are." Rebecca adjusted Lily's blanket, watching as her daughter's eyes widened at the colorful fish swimming beneath the water's surface. "I appreciate you respecting my need to do this properly. No special treatment." "I understand the importance of standing on your own," Alex replied, "perhaps better than most." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Lily's occasional coos at the fish. Over the past weeks, these quiet moments had become increasingly frequent, shared spaces where they could simply exist together without expectation or demand. Something was growing between them, delicate and undefined, neither rushing to label or contain it. "I received more documents from the FBI today," Rebecca said finally. "James's plea deal is finalized. 8 years with possibility of parole after. 5, in exchange for testimony against the firm's senior partners." Alex studied her face. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved it's over. Sad for what might have been. Angry still sometimes." She met his gaze directly. "But mostly, I feel ready to move forward." "And Lily? Will James have any relationship with her?" Rebecca had wrestled with this question for weeks, consulting with both a family therapist and an attorney recommended by Agent Kwan. "Limited supervised visitation when she's older, if he demonstrates consistent interest and responsibility. I won't deprive her of knowing her biological father, but I won't force a relationship that might hurt her either." Alex nodded, his respect for her thoughtful approach evident. A wise balance. "I've been informed I'll need to testify at the sentencing hearing next month," she continued. "In Seattle." Something flickered across Alex's face, concern perhaps, or hesitation. "Will you be comfortable returning there, after everything?" "Not particularly," Rebecca admitted. "But I need to face it sometime. Seattle was my home for years. I can't let James's actions taint it forever." She paused, gathering courage for what came next. "I'd like to use the trip to close up our house, James's and mine. Pack what matters, donate the rest, and put it on the market. Make a clean break." "Of course." Alex's tone was supportive, though she detected a subtle tension in his shoulders. "The company jet can take you whenever you're ready." "Security arrangements." "Actually," Rebecca interrupted gently, "I was hoping you might consider coming with me. With us." She glanced down at Lily. "If you can spare the time from your work." The request clearly caught him off guard. In the weeks since their rescue, Alex had never left the compound, his self-imposed isolation as much a prison as a sanctuary. "You haven't left this mountain in 3 years," Rebecca said softly. "Maybe it's time." Alex turned to look out over the koi pond, his expression unreadable. "You make it sound simple. It isn't. I know that." She shifted to face him more directly. "After James abandoned us, I thought I might never trust anyone again. Every instinct screamed to protect myself, to build walls, to stay in that safe, lonely space. What changed?" Alex asked, still not looking at her. "You showed me that isolation isn't healing. It's just prolonging the pain." She reached out, hesitantly touching his hand. "Maybe it's time for you to consider the same possibility." He looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward to meet hers. The simple gesture felt monumental. A man accustomed to holding himself apart from the world, accepting the most basic human connection. "I can't promise I'll be good company," he said finally. "It's been a long time since I navigated the world outside these walls." "I'm not asking for perfect," Rebecca replied. "Just present." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Rebecca moved her and Lily's belongings to the north apartment, decorated the space with thoughtful touches that made it truly theirs, and prepared for her new professional role. The job offer had come with an assistant who helped arrange the Seattle trip with meticulous attention to detail. Flights scheduled, accommodations secured, security protocols established. Through it all, she watched Alex prepare for his own journey back to the world. His approach was characteristically methodical. Briefings with Mira about Blackwood Enterprises' current public profile, sessions with Dr. Elena that Rebecca suspected were focused on managing anxiety, careful review of security arrangements that would allow him to move through Seattle with minimal public attention. The night before their departure, Rebecca put Lily down for the evening and found Alex waiting on her apartment's terrace, the mountains silvered by moonlight behind him. "Second thoughts?" she asked, joining him at the railing. "Several thousand of them," he admitted with unexpected candor. "But also anticipation. I'd forgotten that was possible." Rebecca studied his profile, struck by how much had changed in the short time since he'd appeared at her cabin door like an unlikely guardian angel. The man beside her now was still guarded, still carrying the weight of his past, but somehow more human, more accessible than the remote billionaire who had rescued them from the storm. "Whatever happens in Seattle," she said quietly, "whatever we find as we move forward, I want you to know how grateful I am. Not just for saving our lives, but for showing me it's possible to rebuild after everything falls apart." Alex turned. To her, his customary reserve softening into something more vulnerable. "You did the same for me, Rebecca. You and Lily." His voice dropped lower. "You made me want to rejoin the world." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Neither moved to close the distance, both understanding instinctively that some journeys couldn't be rushed, that what was building between them required the foundation they were still carefully constructing. "We should get some rest," Rebecca said finally. "Early flight tomorrow." Alex nodded but made no move to leave. "I've arranged something for Lily, if you approve." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. A trust, not excessive, but enough to ensure her education, her security regardless of anything else. Rebecca understood what he wasn't saying, regardless of how things developed between them, regardless of whether the fragile connection they were building flourished or faltered. He wanted Lily protected. "Thank you," she said simply. "I approve." He seemed to relax slightly, nodding once before stepping back. "Then I'll see you both in the morning." As Alex disappeared into the night, Rebecca remained on the terrace, contemplating the journey ahead, not just the physical trip to Seattle, but the emotional terrain they were navigating together. Two damaged people, thrown together by crisis, now cautiously exploring the possibility that what had begun in disaster might evolve into something neither had dared to imagine finding again. Behind her, Lily made a soft sound over the monitor. Rebecca smiled, turning toward the nursery. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges awaited in Seattle and beyond, they would face them together, not as rescuer and rescued, benefactor and recipient, but as two equals finding their way forward, one careful step at a time. Outside, the mountain air carried the promise of spring, though winter still held the land in its grip. Like the season itself, they stood at the threshold of transition, the painful past not forgotten, but gradually losing its power to define the future unfolding before them. The descent into Seattle brought unexpected emotions for both Rebecca and Alex. Through the private jet's window, the familiar skyline emerged from beneath rain-heavy clouds, the Space Needle, downtown skyscrapers, and the sprawling waters of Puget Sound. For Rebecca, it represented both the life she'd lost and the painful memories she needed to confront. For Alex, it marked his first return to the outside world after 3 years of self-imposed isolation. Lily slept peacefully in her carrier, oblivious to the significance of the journey or the tension radiating from both adults. "Still okay?" Rebecca asked softly, noting Alex's white-knuckled grip on the armrest as the plane touched down. He nodded once, his expression composed despite the strain evident in his posture. "Just adjusting to the idea of being visible again." The Blackwood Enterprises security team had arranged everything with military precision. A private terminal, blacked-out SUVs waiting on the tarmac, routes planned to avoid media attention. Alex Blackwood's emergence from seclusion would eventually make headlines, But not today. Not until Rebecca had completed what she needed to do. Their first stop was the federal courthouse downtown. Rebecca testified with quiet dignity at James's sentencing hearing, describing his abandonment without embellishment or vindictiveness. She acknowledged the evidence she'd discovered, but focused primarily on the breach of trust, both personal and professional, that his actions represented. James, thin and hollow-eyed in his orange jumpsuit, attempted to catch her gaze repeatedly. Rebecca looked at him only once, directly, when the judge asked if she had any final statement. "I hope you find a way to make amends," she said simply. "Not to me, but to those whose lives you endangered. Our daughter will know who you are, but what she thinks of you will depend entirely on your choices from this point forward." Alex waited outside the courtroom at Rebecca's request. When she emerged, he said nothing, simply offering his steady presence as they moved to their next destination. The house in Queen Anne, the one she had shared with James, the one they'd planned to sell to move into their new, larger home, stood, rain-washed and silent. The security team swept it before allowing Rebecca and Alex to enter, Lily now awake and curiously taking in her surroundings. "This won't take long," Rebecca said, her voice echoing slightly in the half-empty rooms. James had apparently packed in haste, leaving drawers partially opened and closets in disarray. "I just need to collect some personal items, family photographs." Alex nodded, staying close but allowing her space to process. "Take whatever time you need." Rebecca moved efficiently through the house, filling a single suitcase with carefully selected items, her grandmother's jewelry box, photo albums from her childhood, a few cherished books. In the nursery, painted mint green but never used, she paused briefly before collecting the hand-knitted blanket her mother had made for Lily. "That's everything," she said finally, surveying the space one last time. "The rest can be donated or sold with the house." As they stepped back outside, the rain had stopped, weak sunlight breaking through the clouds. Rebecca took a deep breath of the familiar Seattle air, salt-tinged and fresh. "Are you sad to leave?" Alex asked quietly as they returned to the waiting vehicle. Rebecca considered the question carefully. Not the house, no, but this city. It was home for a long time. She looked down at Lily, now contentedly watching the world from her carrier. "Still, home isn't always a place, is it?" Something shifted in Alex's expression, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a truth he'd been avoiding in his mountain sanctuary. "No," he agreed softly. "It isn't." As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Rebecca didn't look back at the house. Instead, she reached across the seat, taking Alex's hand in a gesture that had become increasingly natural between them. "Thank you for coming," she said simply, "for facing this with me." His fingers tightened around hers. "Where to next?" Rebecca smiled, the weight of the past lightening with each mile that carried them away from what had been. "Forward," she answered. "Always forward."